Right, mental. So it goes around and they can go around and then
Are you working with
the dreams down here. We still lost everything. I had to go. I know. It was amazing. Friday.
All right, everybody.
Right, I just started that today, right?
Yeah, I think we have to I'll find out. And since then, they said that the big storm comes because the maps that they have.
He lives in a attached house. Yeah, right?
We have an attached house.
Did we elevate it?
We totally have an attached house. Okay. Okay, everybody, we are now on council, this homeowner. This is actually a property that's not eligible for RTAPP, but it's one for which I have an elevation certificate. So this is the elevation certificate that that has the address completely blacked out. I should have marked these one or two, but if you see one of them is on Father Papadano Boulevard, the other one you have no idea where it is, because I blacked the whole thing out. That's the one we're going to be working on
It's
now.
not blacked out. It has West 37th Street. We have Brooklyn. Is that the one?
One is that Maryland, one is Brooklyn.
That's the redacted one.
All right, let me, is there an extra copy of one of those? Maybe I've got the wrong elevation. Yeah, we want the West 37th Street.
Yeah, we have that.
I'm just going to grab a copy of
It is very cold here outside.
All right, sorry about that. Okay, so you're looking at the one that has the handwriting on it, right? The little handwriting next to it? Okay, good. All right, I'll explain what the point of that handwriting is to begin with. So first of all, and you might want to mark on this, I'm going to be writing this up for you, but I just haven't gotten to it yet, and I'm sorry, but mark on this kind of relevant points you need to be thinking about. So, the first thing that matters to you is the building diagram number. That's A7. So, going back to the lowest floor. God, wait a minute. Building diagram 9. Sorry, I don't mind that.
Yes.
All right. So, building diagram 9. Here is a house with a subgrade crawl space. Okay, with or without attached garage, but you don't care about that, is what the rule says. So that's going to govern how you're going to answer questions in flood health NY, based on the type of building it is. The next thing you care about is box 9, which is the base flood elevation. This is going to be the current base flood elevation. Ignore the handwritten numbers for a minute, we'll get to that. Then you're going to drop down here to C2 and look at those different points. So C2A is the lowest floor, which is this floor, the bottom of the crawl space. C2B is the next higher floor. If she fills in her crawl space to ground level and installs flood vents, C2B is where her home is going to be rated from. And then C2E, lowest elevation of machinery or equipment. All right, so in her case, the lowest elevation of machinery is 11.27, which is C2B, right? So all of her machinery is above here, it's not down there. That's a good thing. The elevation tells you where the machinery is, which is something you need to know how that's going to affect rates, right? So elevating her machinery isn't really necessarily an issue for her unless this floor was still below the base flood elevation. C2F, lowest adjacent finished grade next to the building, LAG. Okay, this is the ground height. That's the relevant height of ground. And then C2G and C2H, you don't care about that much. All right, so now we're going to go through Flood Help NY. Using these kinds of things, you're going to have to do some math to convert elevation certificate speak into Flood Help NY speak. But before we get there, speaking of math, I'm going to talk about these handwritten notes. There are two methods of measuring sea level, right? All these measurements are against sea level. Sea level is a complicated thing to put a figure on because it goes up and down, it changes. There's an old method, which is, if you look in the middle of the page, line B11, there's a box that's checked NGVD 1929. That's the something vertical datum from 1929. Then there's a box NAVD 1988, which is again some other form of vertical datum. VD, I know what that means, the rest of it I don't know. But 1988. So whichever one of those boxes checked, the elevation certificate will be internally consistent, as this one is. It's always NGVD, the old standard. Flood Help NY uses NAVD. I forgot to ask Scott before he left, but I believe Dewberry and the other engineer will be using NAVD, but you need to understand, you need to pay attention to that box to make sure you're not comparing apples and oranges. So for her, since they're using NGVD, I have converted the base flood elevation in box B9 to 8.9 feet, which is the modern equivalent of 10 feet under NGVD. So basically what you're going to do is subtract a foot. If it's using the old system, if you need to convert it to the new system, just subtract a foot, roughly. All right, and you're going to be tipped off to this if it gives a base flood elevation that isn't consistent on from your elevation certificate to the other site. Okay, again, so we know certain things about this house from the pictures. There's certain things you're going to be asked to answer that you're not necessarily going to know from the pictures. Erin, you were talking with Scott about what kind of photos are going to be attached to the information that you have. Hopefully it's going to have internal and external photos that are going to tell you the number of steps leading up or down from the house that are going to be kind of a guide, but we're going to be using the elevation certificate. So one thing we know is she's an attached home. The only thing she can do to basically, get way above is maybe, assuming like the flood elevation is here, she can abandon her first floor. The building code's been changed to add a floor on top. Scott didn't really talk about that, so we don't know if that's going to be part of their recommendations or not. But she's got limitations here, right? Okay, so looking at her elevation certificate, that's not gonna, here, we'll flip to the flood health. People have actually been to Flood Help NY. Oh, most people. Okay, good. All right, so this is the first screen that you get. So to do this, so you're going to pretend that you're your client. You're going to do this before you meet with them. Go to Discover Your Risk, and then we're going to type in an address. so in terms of, so first, you know, it's gonna prompt you to answer these questions about flood insurance and owner and whatnot. It doesn't matter how you answer these. These for an actual homeowner using the site, these are gonna prompt various different relevant messages depending on how they answer them. For the rate quote, it doesn't. All right, so first off, it tells her that she's currently in an AE zone, 8.9. This is her future zone, which is 11 feet. So again, you know, if you look at her elevation certificate, it says her base flood elevation is 10. That's because it's using the old system. It's actually 8.9. All right, now. All right, we'll wait and then discuss this. Okay, then you're going to scroll down here to get a flood insurance estimate. You will have already received, I believe, from the RTAPP, counseling information, what her current as-is rate is. So what you're doing now is queuing this rate calculator to tell you what it's going to be with various mitigation factors. So you're going to do this according to whatever mitigation factors are available. Raising utilities, if that were applicable, filling in the basement or crawl space, adding flood vents, those kinds of things, right? So, so let's say, so this is a single family home. You did single family. Again, if it's more than one family, that can affect which rate table it pulls from. This, I don't know why it displays that way, but anyway, so she's an attached home. That's not going to affect rates, so it doesn't matter how you answer that question. That affects mitigation options, not rates. Okay, again, how are we going to answer this question? It says it appears this property was built before November 16th, 1983. Is that correct?
Yes.
No.
Oh, yes.
We're always we're gonna treat everything as a newer building, because otherwise it's gonna be the subsidized rate for it. So this Flood Help NY is pulling from Department of Buildings data to, prompt the homeowner to answer the question correctly. We are gonna answer the question to say it's always. So, if this says it seems your property was built after November 1983, is that correct? You're going to hit yes. If it says it was built before, you're going to hit no, right? Does anybody know if there's a way to get this to display like on one page without scrolling up and down? There probably is, but... All right, now this is where you're going to run into trouble, okay? So what Flood Help NY is they're trying to get a sense of how high above or below ground the home is. And it's using this question about steps, but we have actual elevation measurements. We want to use accurate information. We don't want to use something, like steps, which can be confusing as to, well, which steps do you mean, etc. So, what you're going to do is convert feet to steps. Plug it in here. Okay, so let's say what this woman is doing is she's going to fill in her crawl space. She's got a below ground crawl space. All right, so let me finish drawing the house. Okay, so here's what she's going to do. She's going to fill in her crawl space. This is the LAG, right? We talked about this last time. Right? And according to this elevation certificate, her LAG, again, I'm now moving to the handwritten numbers so that we're using the right numbers for here. It's 9.39. Okay, that's 9.39 feet again above sea level. All right, the lowest floor, which when the elevation certificate's done was the crawl space floor, was at 6.38. Right, this is C2A. But if she fills in the crawl space below ground and installs flood vents, C2B becomes the relevant measure, right? Is everybody with me so far on that? Okay, 6.38 is line C2A. So that's the top of the bottom floor, including basement crawl space or enclosure floor. So that's the lowest floor in the house. When they say the top of the bottom floor, all right, I mean, it took me 1.5 years of trying to help people with Sandy flood insurance claims before I figured out what they were talking about, right? Because you think it means this or that, right? The top of the bottom floor means where the rug lies. So as opposed to like the subfloor, the bottom of this floor is the ceiling of the basement.
Right.
The top of this floor, in FEMA speak, nobody else talks this way, is right here where the rug lies.
Right.
So the top of the floor is where the rug lies on the floor.
Right.
All right? So you can just cross out top of or something every time you get one of these, okay? It's the bottom floor. It's the floor of the bottom story of the house. All right, so the top of the bottom floor, again, the bottom floor, including basement crawl space or enclosure, is 6.38 feet above sea level. So that's this, C2A.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
as opposed to C2C, which is the bottom of what he was saying, the lowest horizontal structure.
Member.
Right.
Right. So if you're in a V zone, you get rated, I mean, V zone, if you have a V zone client, Flood Health NY can't help you because it's just way too complicated for that machine to generate. If you're in a V zone, you may have a floor up here, but if you've got some horizontal structure lower than that, then that's where it, yeah. Just don't even pay attention to C2C because if you have a client with anything other than NA and C2C, you can't help them. We just can't, we don't have the technical information to give a rate quote. But those are just V zone people, there aren't very many of those, so. All right, so mainly what you're gonna be toggling between is C2A and C2B. All right, so C2B, the top of the next higher floor. Again, just cross out top of, both of these mean where the rug lies. The top of the next higher floor is where the rug lies here. All right, so C2B is 10.15. Okay, that's C2B. All right, if we want to rate her, so you'll already be told what her rate is starting from here. You need to tell her what her rate would be if she was starting from here. Okay, so, but you need to answer this question in terms of steps. So let's do the calculation, okay? So we're going to steps means from ground level, right? So if you've got a basement, there would be, steps along the side of the house going into the basement. That's what this question is asking about. Steps down or steps up. She no longer has anything subground. It's all steps up. So we want to know the elevation difference between 10.15 and 9.39. We have to express in terms of steps. Somebody have a calculator handy? 9.39.
How many steps?
What's 10.15 minus 9.39?
76.
I'm sorry?
0.76.
0.76. All right. All right. So it's about 3/4 of a foot.
Right.
All right. Now, what does that mean in terms of steps? I'm going to give you the key, and you're going to write this down, and I'll give it to you in writing later. But for now, just write it down. A step is 8 inches. That's what the machinery here is using, right? So that's what the program that runs Flood Health NY is using. The step is 8 inches. That's the same as 0.666666 of an inch. Right? So if we've got 0.76, we have to translate that into a step. We're going to say that's 1 step.
1 step.
All right, so she's got 1 step. You have to do that math. right? At this point, and we may modify it in the future, Flood Help NY can't take input based on steps, or based on feet. It has to be based on steps, yeah.
You said the 0.6666 feet, not inches, right?
Feet, did I say
No,
inches?
0.76. Good.
Yeah, so 8 inches is the same as 0.66666 feet. So, you know, if this were a much bigger difference, if the result of this subtraction between this floor and ground level, make sure you're doing it against ground level, right? That's C2F, is ground level. If the difference between those two is 3 feet, let's say, so then you're going to do 3 times 0.6666, you know, however many times out you want to do, and then, I don't know, what's that come out to?
That's going to be
1.98? Okay, so that's basically 2 steps. Okay, I'm going to give you this in writing, but you need to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it so you don't mess it up. All right, so if it were 3 feet, you're talking basically about 2 steps. You always have to convert these feet measurements into steps in order to get a great book.
Where did you get the 3 feet from?
So are people with me still?
No. Where did you get the 3 feet from?
I just made that up.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just trying to explain how you would do the multiplication. Forget the 3 feet, sorry.
Could you maybe do it?
Yeah.
For the next one, is it possible that we bring the board and drawing board a little closer?
You know, I wish I could, but it won't stand up on this table. You know what, maybe if I put it crossways on that table.
Thank you.
Is that gonna work? All right, yeah. Well, it's not, is that better?
Yeah.
All right, so what we did, to get to steps, right, we're measuring, for mitigation, we're measuring ground level. If you're talking about raising the utilities, that's just a simple answer to a later question. You don't do anything about ground level, and you have to answer the steps question according to the actual house, right? So if it's got subgrade space, you have to ask, you have to use this measurement to determine how many steps there are going down. That gets a little crazier, and we'll talk about that, but or you can ask the homeowner. But make sure you're measuring from the lowest point of ground. Anyway, this step system is unfortunate, but it's what we've got. So, but if you're talking about a mitigation measure that brings the lowest floor up, you're always measuring against ground level. C2F, right? LAG is C2F, lowest adjacent grade. Most houses are not on flat ground like this, right? So you've got it going up and down. This is the lowest adjacent grade. All right, so lowest adjacent grade is 9.3. The top, where the rug lies, of the first floor above ground is 10.15. So we subtract 9.39 from that to find out how far above ground it is. It's 0.76 of a foot. That's about 1 step. All right, so what are we going to answer here? Are there steps leading from ground level to your lowest floor? We just, you know, we're making all this up now, right? Based on these measurements. We're converting the measurements into steps. So we're going to say yes. Do the steps lead up or down? In this case, they lead up. With mitigation, they lead up. If we were trying to get a quote without mitigation, or for elevating mechanicals out of a basement, you'd have to measure this. Yeah, and you'd say down. But at this point, the steps go up. How many steps are there?
1.
Okay, and there's like text here to prompt people to answer this question correctly, but it's very difficult to answer it, or it's easy to answer it incorrectly. All right, does the property have a basement, crawl space, or enclosure? You know, at this point, we've created an above ground crawl space. So, all right, so this is a tricky question, we'll just say yes.
My question now, wasn't it like, there's a height for crawl space or anything gonna be, anything above the LED is gonna be crawl space?
There is a height for a crawl space. A crawl space is defined, and there's in the earlier materials, I gave you a link to, if you Google flood insurance manual, you can get all these definitions. There's a definition section. Crawl space is defined as something that's from floor to floor, right? So again, we're talking about from where the rug would lie in the crawl space to where the rug would lie on the floor above is 5 feet or less. So I usually translate that for homeowners into 4 feet because they don't, like assuming a floor is a foot thick. Is that a reasonable assumption, Scott? Okay. So a floor, the average floor is about 1 foot thick. So that means if the crawl space is higher than 4 feet, it's a basement. If it's more than 2 feet below ground, it's a basement. And then as Scott was pointing out, if any of it is below ground, it's a basement, but a basement for certain purposes that don't have to do with crawl space loading. So anyway, yeah, so there is a height limit. So let's say it's all above ground, and it's more than 5 feet from the ground level to the top where the rug lies on the floor above it. Then I believe that becomes an enclosure. Scott, did you think that's right? Becomes an enclosure. So the answer to this question is still the same. I wanted to go into the details about why they're lumping basement, crawl space, or enclosure all together because some are below ground, some are above ground. It has to do with the way the rates are set. But all right, since this is, okay, we're going to answer yes. The answer to this question is not totally straightforward, but anyway. So it's on a crawl space, we'll answer yes. So now this is getting to your question. What is the floor to ceiling height of the basement, crawl space, or enclosure? In our example, we know that the floor, we now change the floor to grade, right? The floor to floor height difference is 0.76, right? So we're going to say internally,
Can you put in the partial? Can you put in 0.76?
you can't, it only accepts whole numbers.
It's 9.12, so it's 9?
I would say the height of the, let's just put in 1 for now. This is tricky, right? Because, if we're using a foot thickness of the floor, this is just barely funded above ground. Maybe because it wasn't the best example to put, but, it's, all right, for our purposes, we'll put 1. We'll go on to a different example where we're not going to be caught in this bind. 1 foot. Is there building machinery in this sub-ground or at-grade space, this non-living space? No. What line do you look at to find that out? Do you guys remember? Yes. C2E. Lowest elevation of the machinery. It's the same as C2B. Right? So the elevation certificate just told us this is C2B here, right?
Yeah.
The machinery is at this level, so we're going to answer no.
Meaning the machinery is on top of the crawl space.
Yeah, the machinery is on the first floor
yeah.
above ground. All right, so there's no machinery there. So again, if you're trying to get a quote just for elevating the machinery, you're going to answer questions for the house as is, and here, instead of saying yes, which is what the as is state is, you're going to say no. That's the only change you make to get a quote for elevating machinery. And again, it's not going to make a big difference. Ironically, for some reason, for some properties, raising the machinery out of the basement increases the flood insurance cost, believe it or not. And the way that happens is because it's sort of front-loaded in the pricing, so that if they had less than a full policy, raising the machinery would reduce the cost. If they're buying a full policy, raising the machinery unintentionally, but in fact, increases the cost for some people, not for all people. It depends on what the other rating factors are, but it's just a quirk of the flood insurance program. Anyway, sorry for that complex aside. So in here, we're going to say no, there's no machinery there. All right, so her flood insurance goes down to $936 per year. I should have told you that before this, she had been paying like $1,800 or $1,900 for flood insurance. So doing this saves her $1,000 a year. Now that's a small amount of savings because her property is very close to base flood elevation already, and that's the reason I actually chose this, even though it complicated our reason. Because if you look at the lowest adjacent grade, is 9.39. Her base flood elevation is 8.9. Her ground level is higher than the flood level. This is really important. If you find a client whose ground level is higher than the flood level, right? That means that this is where the flood is expected to reach. It's not even going to get into her house because it's not going to get over that ground level. She can file a letter of map amendment, which was an alert that I kind of skipped over above here. Maybe. She can get out of the flood zone. All right, so if you have a case, whoops, go back to profile. All right, if this were displaying sort of on a fuller screen, she would get this alert popping up. Why is she not getting that alert? Well, anyway, there's a pink alert that pops up.
In the future, it goes up back again. It goes back to 1900.
Right, so you're saying in the future,
The future goes back to 1930. So, I mean,
yeah, so in the future, when the whatchamacallit, the base flood elevation increases, then her ground elevation is going to be below that.
Yes.
But for now, she's above it. So she, in fact, this client, filed a letter of map amendment, had her flood insurance policy re-rated as to reflect that she was in an X zone. In fact, she's a little island in the middle of a flood zone, and her insurance has dropped down to about $500 per year. So, and that was an important change for her because she had already, she had canceled all sort of television services. She had cut off phone service. She was doing all kinds of things to make life work on a fixed retired woman's income in light of these rising costs. She'd sort of cut out all luxury, but now, she's saving $1,000 a year. Got it.
And I'll just add to that, the most expensive part about getting a letter of map amendment is the elevation certificate, and now they'll have that for free, so it's really, really simple to apply for that in these situations.
Yeah, and that's why, even if your clients can't do any of these mitigation options, it's worth it for them to get this elevation certificate. All right, we've got like 5 minutes. Let's try another example quickly. This house. Okay, this is the elevation certificate from Father Papadano Boulevard in Staten Island. And like when people ask you about what an an elevated home looks like, you know, is it gonna be ugly? Often it looks just like this, right? Except it doesn't have these windows, maybe it has flood vents, which is what it needs, but, you know, it's got some space above ground, it's got steps going up, it's not at all an ugly house. But, this is not an elevated home, because it's not, it should have been,
It's got full windows.
it's pre-firm, I believe. Anyway, it didn't quite cut it, even though it's on Father Capitano Boulevard where the homes were supposed to be elevated. So, all right, so if you look at the vertical datum, again, they're using NGDB. Unfortunately, we're not going to bother with the conversion. This is for demonstration purposes only. But Scott, do you know, are the elevation certificates that RTAPP people are going to get all in NAVD, or will there be some NGVD based on like what the benchmarks are?
They'll all be in NAVD 88.
Beautiful. Ignore everything I said about doing that. Okay, so, I mean, the Rand Corporation study certificates are coming out in NGVD, and I don't understand why, but.
Now, are the effective maps in, yeah, are they in NGVD 29?
I'm sorry?
The effective maps right now may be in NVG 29, and then the new maps are.
No, my understanding is that the maps in effect now are NAVD.
Right.
Okay,
The
good.
current effective maps, the old maps are 29, the 29 datum. The preliminary new maps that we'll be working to are in the NAVD 88 datum. My
So they're
understanding is the
both still
elevation
be-
certificates will be in the new datum.
Okay, so
Well,
the
but
conversion-
Flood Help NY